Act 2. The Path to Redemption. The confrontation in Valencia marked a turning point for both Azuka and Chuka. Their once strong bond was now a distant memory, replaced by bitterness, regret, and unspoken truths. But as weeks turned into months, both men began to face the repercussions of their choices in their own ways. Back in Sevilla, Azuka's life continued its downward spiral. His business had officially closed, and his once busy schedule was now replaced with long, empty days. The apartment that once echoed with laughter now felt like a cage of solitude. One afternoon, while walking aimlessly through the city, Azuka ran into an old friend, Nkem, a fellow Nigerian who had known Azuka and Chuka since their days in Umuoma. "Azuka, you look terrible," Nkem said bluntly. Azuka managed a weak smile. "Life hasn't been kind lately." Nkem didn't push for details but invited Azuka to join a local support group for African immigrants. "It's not about your problems, per se," he explained. "It's just a place to talk, share experiences, and feel less alone." Initially hesitant, Azuka decided to give it a try. At the meetings, he listened to stories of others who had faced unimaginable hardships, displacement, broken families, even betrayal. Slowly, Azuka began to open up about his own struggles. "It feels like everything I valued has been taken away," he admitted one evening. "But I also know I made mistakes too." Through the support group, Azuka started to see his situation in a new light. The anger that once consumed him began to transform into something else: acceptance. He wasn't ready to forgive Chuka or Amoka yet, but he realized he needed to start healing for his own sake. In Valencia, Chuka was grappling with his own guilt. The move had created a physical distance between him and Azuka, but emotionally, he felt as if his cousin was still standing right beside him, accusing him of betrayal. His relationship with Amoka, once fueled by passion and a shared desire to bring joy to Azuka, was now strained. Arguments became frequent, and the weight of their actions loomed over them like a dark cloud. One night, during a particularly heated fight, Amoka broke down. "Chuka, I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "We destroyed everything: our families, our friendships, our own peace of mind. Maybe it's time we take responsibility for what we've done." Chuka was silent, her words cutting deeper than any accusation Azuka had thrown at him. For the first time, he considered the possibility of reaching out to Azuka, not to defend himself, but to apologize. Months later, with the encouragement of Nkem and others from the support group, Azuka agreed to meet Chuka. The encounter was arranged in a neutral location, a small cafe in a quiet neighborhood of Sevilla. When Chuka walked in, Azuka felt a surge of emotions: anger, sadness, and a faint flicker of nostalgia. "I'm not here to justify anything," Chuka began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. For the pain I caused you, for breaking your trust, and for letting things go so far." Azuka stared at him, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You think an apology fixes everything? You think it undoes the years I spent believing we were brothers?" Chuka lowered his head. "No. I know it doesn't. But it's the truth. And I carry the guilt for the rest of my life." The two men talked for hours. There were raised voices, moments of silence, and even a few bitter laughs as they recounted their childhood memories. By the end of the conversation, while forgiveness wasn't fully granted, there was a sense of understanding. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," Azuka admitted. "But maybe this is a start." For Amoka, the realization that her actions had caused so much damage weighed heavily on her. She decided to visit Azuka as well, this time without Chuka. "I know I've hurt you more than anyone else," she said, standing nervously in his doorway. "But I want you to know that I never intended for things to turn out this way." Azuka let her in, their conversation tense but honest. For the first time, Azuka admitted that she had been lost in her own emotions, trying to balance her love for Azuka with the unexpected bond she had formed with Chuka. "I'm sorry," she said through tears. "And I hope, someday, you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." While Azuka didn't have all the answers, the meetings with Chuka and Azuka marked the beginning of a slow, painful journey toward closure. He decided to move back to Umuoma for a while, reconnecting with his roots and finding solace in the simplicity of village life. Chuka and Azuka, on the other hand, focused on their family, working hard to rebuild their lives and create a stable environment for the children. Though their relationship remained complicated, they were committed to taking accountability for their past and ensuring their children grew up surrounded by love and honesty. As for Azuka, the scars of betrayal would never fully heal, but they no longer defined him. He realized that while forgiveness might not come easily, it was the only path to true freedom. Back in the quiet village of Umuoma, Azuka rediscovered parts of himself he had lost over the years. The slow, rhythmic life of the village was a stark contrast to the chaos of Sevilla. Here, he was no longer defined by the painful events that had consumed him. Azuka spent time with the elders, sitting under the old Iroko tree, listening to stories of resilience and forgiveness. The elders shared tales of brothers and cousins who had once been torn apart but had found a way to reconcile. These stories planted seeds of hope in Azuka's heart. One day, Neka, Azuka's childhood friend and confidant, visited him. She had heard of everything that had happened in Sevilla and came with words of wisdom. "Azuka," she said, "pain will always find its way into our lives, but so can healing. You've been carrying this burden for too long. Let it go, not for them, but for yourself." Her words lingered in his mind. That night, under the starry village sky, Azuka made a decision. He wouldn't let bitterness dictate the rest of his life. Meanwhile, in Valencia, Chuka's life was far from perfect. Although his family was together, the foundation of their relationship was shaky. Azuka often retreated into herself, struggling with the guilt of her past actions. The children, too young to understand the full story, sensed the tension and often asked questions about Uncle Azuka. Chuka knew he had to make things right, not just for Azuka, but for his own peace of mind. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, he turned to Azuka. "I've been thinking," he said cautiously. "Maybe we should go back to Umuoma, even if just for a short visit. I think it's time we face everything head-on." Azuka was hesitant at first but eventually agreed. She, too, longed to close this painful chapter and find some semblance of peace. A few months later, Chuka and Azuka arrived in Umuoma with their children. News of their return spread quickly through the village, and by the time they reached Azuka's family compound, a small crowd had gathered. Azuka stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable. Chuka stepped forward, holding his oldest daughter's hand, while Azuka stood a few steps behind. "I didn't come here to argue or defend myself," Chuka began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I came to apologize, Azuka. For everything." For a long moment, Azuka said nothing. Then he stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. Inside the family compound, the two men sat across from each other, just as they had done so many times in their youth. But this time, the air was heavy with unspoken words. "Do you remember," Azuka said suddenly, "when we used to sit here, dreaming about the future? We thought nothing could break us." Chuka nodded, his eyes misty. "I remember." They talked late into the night, revisiting their childhood memories and slowly, painfully, addressing the events that had torn them apart. It wasn't easy. Azuka vented his frustrations, Chuka admitted his failings, and Azuka shared her regrets. But as the hours passed, the walls between them began to crumble. The following days were transformative. Chuka, Azuka, and their children spent time reconnecting with the community, while Azuka found himself opening up to the possibility of healing. One evening, the village elders organized a small gathering under the Iroko tree. They spoke about forgiveness, unity, and the importance of family. As the elders shared their wisdom, Azuka felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Though the wounds of the past wouldn't disappear overnight, the process of healing had begun. Azuka, Chuka, and Amoka agreed to rebuild their relationships, not just for themselves but for their children, who deserved to grow up surrounded by love and unity. Azuka eventually returned to Seville, not to escape, but to start afresh. He reopened a smaller, more manageable business and began to rebuild his life with a new sense of purpose. Chuka and Amoka stayed in Valencia but visited Umuoma frequently, ensuring their children stayed connected to their roots. The two men, once inseparable, were not as close as before, but they had reached a place of mutual respect and understanding. Months passed since Chuka and Amoka's visit to Umuoma, and Azuka, though still haunted by the past, began to find a sense of purpose again. He immersed himself in the rhythms of village life, helping elders with farming, trading, and mentoring younger men who sought guidance. In many ways, it was the simplicity of village life that helped him rediscover peace. There, he was no longer defined by the betrayal but by the man he was becoming, stronger, wiser, and more understanding. One day, while walking in the fields, Azuka met a young man, Ifoni, who had recently returned to Umuoma after completing his studies abroad. Ifoni was passionate about community development and wanted to build a project to empower the youth of Umuoma, focusing on agriculture and trade. Intrigued by his vision, Azuka offered his support. Over time, Azuka became an essential part of the project, offering advice, resources, and guidance. It wasn't just about helping others, it was also a way for him to heal. As Ifoni's project grew, so did Azuka's confidence. His grief, though still present, became something he could channel into something productive and positive. While Azuka found peace in Umuoma, Chuka's journey was far from over. The guilt still gnawed at him, and his attempts to reconcile with Amoka only highlighted the cracks in their relationship. The love that had once seemed so strong now felt fragile, as though it could shatter at any moment. Chuka often spent long nights alone, staring out at the city skyline, questioning his choices. Was it too late to undo the damage? Could his family ever truly be whole again? Despite his attempts to move forward, the echo of Azuka's pain and Amoka's sorrow haunted him. In one of his darkest moments, Chuka decided to visit a counselor to help him process the weight of his actions. The sessions were difficult, bringing up raw emotions and confronting him with painful truths. But through the counselor's guidance, Chuka started to understand that redemption was not about erasing the past, it was about taking responsibility for it and striving to be a better person going forward. After months of internal struggle, Chuka decided it was time to make one final attempt at reconciliation. He called Azuka, hoping to speak with him face to face once more, this time without the walls of anger and hurt that had once separated them. Azuka hesitated when he received Chuka's call, memories of the past flooding back. But this time, something in him had changed. He realized that holding on to the pain was only hurting him, and if there was even the slightest chance to rebuild their bond, he was willing to try. They agreed to meet in Umuoma. It was a place of healing for Azuka, and Chuck knew that it might offer the neutral ground they both needed. The day they met was quiet, with only the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The villagers watched as Azuka and Chuka stood in front of each other once more, this time with a sense of vulnerability that neither had shown before. "I know this isn't easy," Chuka began, his voice trembling. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I can't keep living like this, haunted by what I've done. I owe you more than an apology." Azuka, who had been silent up until that point, finally spoke, his voice steady but emotional. "It's been a long road, Chuka. I've carried the burden of what you did for a long time. But I've learned something in all this. Holding on to that pain wasn't making me stronger, it was only weighing me down. For the first time in years, Azuka allowed himself to breathe. He wasn't free of the past, but he was free from its suffocating hold. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you. But I do know this, you're my family, and you always will be. Chuka's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve it, but I'll take it. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man you deserve. The two men embraced, an awkward yet powerful gesture of reconciliation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step forward. In the months that followed, Azuka and Chuka's relationship began to heal slowly. They kept in touch, met regularly, and worked on projects together. Azuka continued to grow the community project with Ifani, and Chuka, although he struggled with his own internal demons, supported Azuka from afar. Amoka, too, made progress in her own journey. She realized that while she couldn't change the past, she could still be a good mother to her children and support her family. Chuka and Amoka's relationship, though strained, began to shift as they worked together to raise their children with the values of honesty and respect. In Umuoma, the community witnessed a transformation, not just in Azuka and Chuka, but in the entire village. People who had once been divided by old grudges and long-held feuds began to seek reconciliation, inspired by the journey of the two cousins. Years later, Azuka stood at the very spot where he and Chuka had met that day in Umuoma. The village had flourished, and he had married again, finding peace in a new chapter of his life. He had built something lasting not just in the physical sense, but in the hearts of those around him. As he watched the children of the village play under the Iroko tree, Azuka reflected on the journey he had taken. It had been painful, and at times it felt impossible, but he had learned that forgiveness wasn't just a gift for others, it was a gift for himself. In Valencia, Chuka and Amoka, though still navigating their relationship, had built a life that was stable for their children. They often visited Umuoma, where they were welcomed as part of the family. Lessons learned. The story of Azuka, Chuka, and Amoka became a cautionary tale in Umuoma, a reminder of how easily trust can be broken but also how it can be mended with effort and sincerity. The story of Azuka and Chuka had become a lesson passed down through generations, a reminder that even in the deepest wounds, there could be healing. And while the road to redemption was never easy, it was always worth walking. The end. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more legends, wisdom, and excitement straight from the heart of Africa. Be sure to click the bell icon so you never miss out on our upcoming captivating stories. See you in the next video.